Welcome to EFT MBA Mastering Business Acumen with the help of EFT business experts. Learn the marketing, mindset, and skill set you need to create the EFT coaching practice of your dreams. Visit www.eftmba.com for more information. And now, here's the EFT training team that embodies the art and science of EFT. Alina Frank and Dr. Craig Weiner.
Hello and welcome to our show. We have a lot of material for you today, and we keep it at 30 minutes. I'm Alina Frank, and I'm here.
And I'm Craig Weiner. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Glad to hear you guys are online.
So we're going to be talking today about the 5 things you should never, ever, ever do as an EFT coach. Being an EFT or a tapping coach provides a fabulous vocation. It has tremendous independence, flexibility, the potential for financial rewards and greater and greater personal potential and development. And it is unlicensed. It's an unlicensed profession. We're not talking about licensed mental health care professionals. We're talking about EFT coaches. And it's a field that's filled with all kinds of possibilities. And that said, from where we sit as trainers and mentors and business coaches, we've seen more than one practitioner still either getting into trouble with state licensing boards, doing harm to a client, other issues that really beckons the potential for really talking about the dark side, the shadow side of tapping with others. And so we've devoted this show to just that. So let's launch right in to what's the first thing on the top of the list here, Craig?
Well, if I were a listener, I might be tapping already. Right?
Yes.
Feeling a little nervous, a little scared. Am I doing something I shouldn't be? Do I not have something in place that I should?
Yep.
Ooh, that one I'm not sure about. So, if I was listening, I might be tapping a little bit on that kind of squirrely feeling. But
definitely, and it's something that you do need to make peace with. And we're not trying to scare you, but if you go about this and completely disregard risk management in your practice, then I often hear people say, "Oh, I wish we were licensed so we could bill insurance companies." And we could spend a whole show just on talking about the pros and cons of that. But a number of people do realize, and including therapists that we are training that want to be using EFT as a coaching practice and not under the umbrella of their therapy practice. And so if we don't get clarity and we don't regulate ourselves and we don't try to be as ethical and as clear as possible, then the government is going to come down on us. And so we just want you to be really conscious of what the issues are, not to scare you, but to make sure that you can check off the boxes of what you need to set up as you develop your practice.
And one other thing is I bring almost 25 years of experience as a chiropractor. Mm-hmm. And what I know about practitioners is people tend to act like, well, I can kind of do what I want because I haven't gotten in trouble for it. Mm-hmm. I've advertised this way. I've had this on my website. I've done this. I've said this. And you know what? I haven't had a single problem with it for 5 years, 10 years, et cetera. And then you happen to be in a forum or wherever it is where somebody, for whatever reason, was the one that got singled out, caught, et cetera, and they understand very, very clearly all the implications and things that they've been assuming had been okay or kind of just, looking the other way. And it's not till you get caught, it's not till you're in the situation, you experience it yourself that you realize the seriousness of what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be an attorney. You just have to have been somebody that experienced or know somebody that went through this to know how very, very serious and important the things we're going to go over are.
Sure.
Okay?
All right, so let's go.
Number one, never represent yourself falsely. Now, on one hand, somebody would say, okay, great, well, I'm not saying I'm a medical doctor when I'm not. I'm not saying that I'm this when I'm not, but it's more subtle than that. So what I mean by this is that unless you are a physician, a licensed therapist or counselor, an acupuncturist, etc., if you are not one of those mental health care or licensed professionals that are out there in the community already, then you are a teacher. You are a coach. You are an educator. And you have to be very, very, very clear and not misrepresent yourself in any way. And you might think, well, I don't. And I presume that you would think that because you wouldn't do it consciously. But in your advertising, in your marketing, if you use words that, and especially we can speak to the United States, but you need to know the regulations for your city, for your state, for your country, etc. If, for example, in the United States, you use the word, well, I counsel people, or I provide a type of therapy, tapping therapy. If I use terms like energy therapy, if I use, well, the psychology of well-being, if I use energy psychology, wait a minute, EFT is a type of energy psychology, but if I am an unlicensed person using in my marketing materials or my forms those words, those are going to set you up for potential legal problems from state licensure boards, and if any way you are implying or they are perceiving that you're a therapist of sorts, that's how they're going to speak about you. And when they speak about you, I have this amazing tapping, I don't know what they do, this therapist, and in their languaging they speak to their brother-in-law that's a psychiatrist at the state board, or they speak to their best friend that's a counselor on whatever board or licensing or person that is involved with safeguarding patients and clients in the profession they are in. You will all of a sudden become a potential target. And you don't want to put your livelihood in jeopardy. So when you start doing things like advertising on your website or your marketing materials, what we call DSM diagnoses, mental health diagnoses like depression, like anxiety disorders, like borderline personality, all of those things, you are just asking for problems. Or if you list even what are called ICD-9 physical diagnoses, okay, like what? Irritable bowel syndrome, herniated disc, cancer, even things like fibromyalgia. These, if you can find these words as diagnoses in these manuals, you're asking for trouble. That doesn't mean that you're not helping people with these conditions, but you are going to have to find languaging like sad, like chronic pain, like anxiousness, like all of those things that describe states but are not clinical diagnoses. And the last thing I just want to say with that is, even if you say, you know what, I told my client that I'm not a therapist and, if you don't continue to clarify that and you only do it once at the first visit and you're not continuing to clarify what your role is, what you are and what you are not, the client's perception is all that matters. So they're needing to be clear how you're conducting your sessions. For example, if tapping is not the number one thing that you're doing in a session and you're counseling and teaching and talking, they are going to start to get the impression of you as a counselor or therapist, and you are going to start walking a fine line that makes you more vulnerable.
Yep.
What would you like to add to that? I know there's a lot there, but...
I want to add that I've been out in public when someone has introduced me in our small community as their therapist, and I have immediately corrected them. Somebody said, this is Dr. Frank. I said, no. I do not practice medicine, and I'm not a licensed mental health care professional. So you might think that you're being clear, and believe me, I have all of the documents, and I have all of the right intakes, and all of the legal forms, and still people make that mistake. I had even our CPA. When he was checking off when he wrote in his staff wrote in my occupation, they put in therapist, and I immediately called them and I said, no, the IRS knows me as a life coach or consultant. So You have to be very clear, and you have to make sure that you don't give the perception, and you have to correct the perception. And again, it's not that we're trying to scare you. It's that if you have all of these things in place, then you will essentially feel comfortable and be able to sleep at night. We have unfortunately seen too many EFT coaches that have been threatened by their state boards, and they have been cleared, right? These were people that did cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and yet the state board perceived something that they said was practicing medicine without a license, being a therapist without doing therapy without a license. So these folks were eventually cleared. Their names were cleared. But can you imagine the trauma that they went through, the tens of thousands of dollars in attorney fees that they went through? They were told that they couldn't practice while they were under investigation. And so all of that can be avoided. And we had dinner with someone that went through that a few years ago recently, and she was saying she cringes at 99% of the websites that are out there and their languaging that EFT coaches still just do not get. So let's go on to then number 2, because I think that this will buttress nicely with what we just talked about.
Number 2, never make guarantees or promises about anticipated results. So this is unethical. This will set you up for potential legal threats and difficult scenarios when you have a difference of opinion of what we set out to do. Are you acting as a coach and setting goals, for example, to achieve? Are those clear from the outset? Because we know with the apex effect that things change. People think, oh, it really was never that bad, or I thought that we were going to try to get here. So there's always ambiguity in communication and perception. So you are going to just step into trouble if you guarantee or promise something that you can't possibly know for sure. So when we start talking about languaging, that's one piece. Do not put, guaranteed results, and I've seen that.
Yep.
You've got to understand that. Go ahead. You want to add?
I just want to make very clear that even if you are not living in the United States, the FTC will come after you because your website reaches the United States. So if you are doing work with anyone inside the United States as your client, you are held liable for these as well. So there's a specific act that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission Act, prohibits unfair or deceptive advertising in any medium. That is, advertising must tell the truth and not mislead consumers. In addition, claims must be substantiated, especially when they concern health, safety, or performance.
Okay, so let's just pause there for a second.
Yeah.
So if you're saying you help people with XYZ,
health condition or peak performance,
or whatever it is,
yeah,
and you don't have any research behind that, number one, you don't have any substantial evidence documented of what you've done, you are walking a fine line. So, all of this comes down to the preponderance of evidence. It's usually not going to be any one thing, but it's going to be, oh, this person's acting like a therapist. What are all the different things that then, for example, add up to saying that? So that's what we're looking at, is we're minimizing the risk. We're minimizing the problems of what we're putting out there that in totality make us somehow misleading in what we're saying or doing or being able to back up.
And the type of evidence may depend on the product, the claims, and what experts believe necessary. So if you end up in front of a judge trying to defend yourself, guess what experts will be called up to testify that you are making an unsubstantiated claim?
Yeah, you think they're going to pull Gary Craig up? Probably not. Think they're going to pull somebody from our profession? Probably not. They're going to be people that are expert witnesses in the field of, well, what were we working with? And that person, you're working with fears and anxiety, so we're going to pull in a psychologist, a forensic psychologist that deals with that. Guess how you're going to look in that perspective if you're not dotting your I's and crossing your T's.
Right.
Yeah. So really important. So what are some other things that you need to make sure that you have in place? Well, in advertising, disclaimers. Hugely important. If you're on anything online, if you don't have a disclaimer that, quote, consumers must be able to notice, read, or hear and understand, can't be gobbledygook, the information, it needs to be part of a disclaimer. Disclosure is not usually enough to remedy a deceptive claim. So you need to have a disclaimer that's easily available, easily readable, easily understandable. All these things we need to have. I think it's useful to always have another perspective when we think it's clear, that we have somebody else with even more knowledge and even an attorney be able to go through and to make sure, nope, that's clear, I understand, that's obvious. Really important.
And there's even a particular way that it needs to be on your website. And when I look at, I see what people are doing. I'm curious. Somebody is looking for us to help them with business in the EFT MBA program. We go checking out their websites and we give a business evaluation. And I tell you, 99% of the things I see out there are incorrect. So we're just bringing this to your attention. You need to really be cognizant of what you need to have, especially on your website and promotional material. All right, so number 3, something that a EFT coach should never, ever, ever do is you should never stray beyond your comfort zone nor your experience or skill level, right? If you are not a licensed mental health care provider, you should not work with any individuals who have been diagnosed with mental health conditions without making sure that their therapist is aware of and accepting your work, the work that you're doing. I've had a client who wanted to work with me, and when I did a consult with them, I realized that they were under the care of and they needed to be under the care of a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And what I said was, I'll work with you, but I need written permission from those 2 mental health care licensed professionals telling them that they know that you're working with me and that it's safe to proceed. So if you're working with someone that has physical conditions, your first question should always be,
have you seen a doctor for this?
Right.
Right. And whatever that means for them. Right, it might be their naturopath, their chiropractor, their medical doctor, whatever it is, depending on the condition. But you want to make sure you are, number 1, CYA, you are covering your rear end, and you are in their best interest making sure that they're looking at both the energetic, emotional, and physical components of what's going on for them. Mm-hmm. Right? Really important.
Yep.
So
And when you do work with someone who has not been diagnosed, and maybe some of the significant trauma that comes up for them is something that they didn't even realize was there, as is the case with EFT very often when we're uncovering things in the subconscious, you need to have either the skill set, experience to help them regulate themselves for sure, but also in advance in your practice, you need to have rock-solid referral sources that you can execute when the need arises. So I have a list that I've cultivated throughout the years, knowing that in my private practice, I wanted to work with sex. Now, you tell me, that is a huge, I knew I was going to encounter some real landmines, especially when I first started my practice. And so I developed a great network of people that I can refer out to when this arises, and we do need to be in collaboration with these people. And they really respect the fact that I'm open and honest about the work that I'm doing, and I'm not crossing any lines, and I'm knowing when to refer. And sometimes it is a matter of when you're working with physical things show up, that you're not getting results because it feels like something is blocked, and to follow your gut. I had a client that we worked on all of the issues around the emotional contributing factors to weight loss, and nothing was happening. And I recommended that they go see a doctor, and she said, well, I've gone down that route. And I said, there's something that's still going on here. And lo and behold, it was that there was a pituitary tumor. So if EFT it doesn't seem to be working, and you know that you're skilled enough, you need to just keep asking your client to go and seek medical help. I remember my daughter was having a play date with a friend when she was young, and this girl fell over on her bicycle, and I knew after a round of tapping on the pain that she was experiencing in her arm that it was broken, because the pain was just not really diminishing or going away, and so I'm not going to sit there and try to tap with her for the next hour. She needed to go get medical attention, and we took her to the hospital. So yeah, I definitely have all of those in place, your referral sources in place for when this happens, because it will. Number 4, Craig.
Never, ever, ever break confidentiality. Okay?
Never, ever?
Never, ever. This is in our workshop whenever we train. This is, it's number 1, right? And being able to create a safe space for anybody to heal, and they need to know that what they're sharing with you is confidential. So what does that mean? Okay, number 1, it means you don't talk about their names and stories to other people. That's obvious. But what about on subtler levels? Well, let's just say that they give you permission to share their stories. Like, yeah, you can tell people. Does that mean that you can tell people, or you can write their story and have it published on your website, or submit it to, say, EFT Universe or another place? Oh, not sure. She didn't give full permission there. It wasn't asked. What about sharing, when you're sharing a story, is it okay to use their name? Not okay to use their name? Lots of clarification and confidentiality for what you think you understand. Oh, they said I can share it, but they never meant you could use their name. They meant their story, etc. So number 1 is always never assume that you know what you mean. So always best, especially if it's going to be reproduced in writing, etc., to get written permission, whether it's a testimonial or sharing their story in writing, etc. I still would always recommend changing the name and some of the details, especially in smaller communities where people can still connect them back. Best not to, and it's not needed to use their name. And also, when do you break confidentiality? And that's going to depend on your state or city and nation's legal obligations. But the rule of thumb is if that you strongly suspect on different levels, based on what they've said and how they've acted, et cetera, that they are going to do harm to themselves or another, you have the responsibility of reporting that information to your local authorities. And that's going to vary. You need to know what your town, city, state's obligations, legal responsibilities are. You may say, well, I'm not a therapist, so I don't have that responsibility. You know what? If somebody did harm and you and the family brought you up in front of a judge, and the judge says, I know you're not licensed, but you are acting in a confidential manner that is perceived by the person that way, you had that responsibility.
For
yeah?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, number 5.
Okay, number 5 is never assume you can help everyone. There is an assumption when you first start out with EFT that you can help everyone all the time. And this, for sure, will be your Achilles heel, and set up expectations that will be impossible to achieve, as well as you have then a bind to the possibility that you were not meant to work with this person, and that there are other paths that may serve your client or your potential client better. So what do we mean by that is we work with our students on all of these things, and especially trying to get clarity on who you're meant to work with and who you're really not meant to work with. And there's a saying, if you're a friend to everyone, you're a friend to no one. You know, it's really true. You just cannot serve every single person, and we don't want you to. And I think that's a recipe for financial ruin in this business. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So get clear on your niche, know who you're meant to serve, know how skillful you are and what your limitations are, and you will not get into trouble, and in fact you will flourish.
Good. Now that's
okay, and so we keep it for 30 minutes, Craig. What's the last one? We stuck another one here. There were supposed to be 5, but here's a bonus.
We did a bonus 6. Okay.
Bonus.
What you should never do, never, ever, ever see a new client without proper documentation. What does that mean? Well, you better have some sort of client intake form, and I'm going to recommend that you be able to do that in advance of when they're at your door, if at all possible. If not, that you at least have a client intake form that informs you about any diagnoses that they've been given, mentally or physically, so you can help determine, number one, do we proceed forward? Is this person meant to be here? Do we need to have certain things and permissions, et cetera, in place first? And that's why I really prefer that people have those submitted to them where they receive it ahead of time, so that if another step, permission from a mental health care provider or physician, et cetera, needs to happen, that's happening before they're sitting in front of you. Right? So a thorough client intake form. And the next most important one that's critical is what is referred to as an informed consent process. What was the third word that I said?
Process. Not just form.
Didn't I mean form?
No.
No, I definitely did not. Informed consent is a process. It means they are informed as to what you're doing and why you're doing and what they should be able to expect from that and what it includes and what happens if anything that you want to inform them in that could be a problem, that what happens if they miss an appointment, what happens if something shows up in a session, what happens if, et cetera, et cetera. The more thorough you can be ahead of time with that process means that they understand all the likely things that you can imagine might happen, and they're consenting to it. So it can't just be a form. It needs to actually be part of a process of discussion. And to be honest, I think it's actually something that's kind of continually in the presence, and not necessarily that the form is being reviewed, but again, the ongoing clarification of what are our roles here, what are the expectations. That is a continual process of informed consent, and those are absolutely expected. So that also is a real gift. You know, an informed consent process helps you to be clear from the very beginning whether this is the person you're meant to be working with. It also helps them be very clear on you and whether they're meant to be working with you. So I now love the informed consent process for the clarity that it gives at the beginning of a relationship where I used to be scared about it. That's really shifted for me. So always have proper documentation as far as intake so you know what you're getting into and who you're working with, and always have an informed consent process that's continually being upgraded, improved as you become more skillful too. Yeah?
And I can tell you that over the last 5 years, as my forms have become more and more clear, just to give you a read on what happens in my full practice. So in the last 5 years, as my documents have gotten more clear, I've gone from having a one page, okay, to now I think it's up to like 17 pages.
17 pages? Oh my God!
Yeah. Okay. If you're scared, you know what to do. You're going to tap on it. If you're really, really scared and terrified, guess what? This has nothing to do with this particular issue. This is much deeper. And please, please have somebody tap with you on this, because it does have deeper roots to your feeling that you're going to be faking it, or that you're an imposter, or that you're not qualified. You know, all those stupid core issues that we deal with that need to be resolved if you plan on having this be a full-time thriving business. So what was I going to say? Oh yeah, just to give you just kind of a gauge. In the last 5 years as my forms have gotten tighter and just more extensive and actually proper, right? I have had 2 people say that they can't work with me because of something that they've read either on my intake or my any of my documentation, and I take that as a self-selecting process. If I had just said, okay, you know what, just like forget it, you don't have to do that, those would have been my nightmare clients that I would have been kicking myself in the pants for taking, and it would have been trouble. So there is a self-selecting process that goes on when someone tells you that they can't sign this. It's a red flag. Yeah?
Yep, it's helpful.
Oh.
It is.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yep. Okay,
And
so we are out of time. We stick to 30 minutes, and we just do our best because we know you are busy. And so if you would like to find out more, we're starting to accept in the next month, we are going to start accepting applications for our next EFT MBA program. It's a 6-month commitment where we go over these kinds of issues. So EFTMBA.com, come and check us out. We also recommend for the deeper legal things. We have an interview with her. She's fabulous resource for anyone doing this work. She's a legal consultant, Midge Murphy. Just go Google her, Midge Murphy. Check her out, consult with her. She's a fantastic legal resource for ethics and risk management in the field of EFT, and we can't say enough about her. So thank you, and in the future we will be doing a podcast because we realize that this is more risk management, these five items. We're going to have a future podcast on client and practitioner boundaries, which is even another really juicy set of things that we really want to share with you. So for now,
great job.
Yes, thank you. And we hope to see you somewhere in cyberspace or live at one of our events. You can check us out at EFTtappingtraining.com. And until we see you again, remember to keep on tapping.